Good morning to you all. As mentioned, I'm Dave Vaughton with MTC ABAG. As was also mentioned, Chair Nowak is with us this morning. I don't know, Chair, if you wanted to say a few words before I jump into today's item.
Oh, no, I'm just, thank you all for inviting us to participate in this. Uh, Dave is the go-to expert on everything Plan Bay Area. We just completed Plan Bay Area 2050 plus and are just beginning the process on 2060. So this is actually really good timing to have this discussion. So I will leave it all to Dave.
All right, I agree. This is a good time to talk about our long range planning work. So again, thanks for the invite this morning. I'm going to go ahead and share my slides here. I do have a slide deck that gives a very quick overview on the plan, but spends more time focusing on the implementation priorities coming out of it, as I know that was an interest area for this group. Okay, hopefully everyone can see my screen here.
Yeah, it looks good.
Great. So, Plan Area 2050 Plus was just adopted by the Commission and the ABAG board in March of this year. It was a limited and focused update to a very comprehensive overhaul that we did Plan Area 2050 back in 2021. The goal here was really to refresh the plan to reflect post-pandemic priorities and needs. The first two slides here may be, many folks may be well aware of this, but I just wanted to make sure we're all up to speed on what the plan is and what it is not. Plan Bay Area is our long-range vision for the Bay Area. It fulfills a variety of federal and state requirements. Its intent is really to integrate transportation, land use, and environmental priorities, weighing and balancing the trade-offs that exist in those spaces. Since its inception, the plan has focused on concentrating growth in near transit to create communities that are more complete, affordable, and resilient. Importantly, it is not a mandate. It sets regional priorities. It establishes a vision, a foundation for where we can go as a region, while respecting local land use authority. And plans continue to evolve to reflect emerging needs and rely heavily on partnerships with many of your organizations, as well as with local governments, state agencies, all those types of folks. This is part of a series of long-range plans that we are statutorily required to produce every 4 years. You can see here, dating back to 2013, the original Plan Bay Area was the first ever plan to really focus on state-mandated climate goals and this land use transportation integration. Plan Bay Area 2040, adopted in 2017, lifted up the housing crisis that faces our region. Plan Bay Area 2050, which was developed during the pandemic, kind of set this aspirational vision for where we could go as a region coming out of the pandemic. And 2050 Plus, which was most recently adopted, refreshed key strategies in that long-range plan. We are required to develop another iteration of Plan Bay Area, which is targeted for 2030 and is anticipated to be kind of a major refresh of the long-range vision. It's important to caveat that although the commission and board did approve the plan in March 2026, that actually is just a series of approvals of which we are still underway. So technically, there are still several more hurdles for this plan to clear at the state and federal levels. So those approvals, we were fortunate to have the board and commission approve the plan in March. We are also fortunate to learn that the deadline for CEQA litigation has passed and no lawsuits were filed against the plan. We have, as many of you know, CEQA can often be an avenue for litigation, and past iterations of Plan Bay Area have had lawsuits against them, not this time. Caltrans has also recommended approval of the plan. The steps remaining really relate to federal agencies, which are currently reviewing the plan, FHWA and FTA. But perhaps most notably, the California Air Resources Board, which takes kind of the strongest regulatory scrutiny of the plan, including its greenhouse gas performance. And based on past trends, typically that approval can last up to a year in review. So we'll have more intel on that hopefully by 2027. In the meantime, Plan Bay Area 2050 Plus really reaffirms the vision of a affordable, connected, diverse, healthy, and vibrant free region for all. It's defined by 35 strategies, which are policies or investment packages under these 11 key themes. In transportation, a heavy focus on maintaining and optimizing our existing systems. That accounts for about 75% of all transportation monies going forward. Building out a 10,000-mile network of safe bikeways across the region, and a fast and frequent next generation transit network. In the housing space, it promotes a kind of an expansive vision for housing for all, spurring housing production in key growth geographies, investing in affordable housing production, preservation, and protection policies. The plan also includes economic strategies to improve economic mobility, to try to encourage jobs to cluster near transit. And of course, in the environment element of the plan, it incorporates a robust list of sea level rise resilience projects to protect communities, also to protect infrastructure, as well as efforts to expand access to parks and reduce climate emissions. So some of the key changes in 2050 plus, a recognition that remote work was not just a temporary phenomenon, but something that is anticipated to be long lasting, and affects our financial forecasts, behavior patterns going forward. The strategies for transit were reinvented to really respond to the declines we saw during the pandemic, and the sorts of strategies that have helped transit ridership grow in the past few years, like safety and security in our transit stations, as well as a focus on frequency and speed rather than large-scale capital projects. The plan also pivoted to reflect rising office vacancies and shifts in land use priorities. On the financial side, key changes included an $80 billion cut to anticipated transportation revenues. This required, as I mentioned, a real reinvention away from major capital projects and a focus on frequency and speed, especially investments in our bus systems. Housing strategies were also recalibrated to include new components designed to reduce per unit affordable housing construction costs, given the sheer magnitude of those strategies. On the transit side, all of those efforts kind of coalesced into a next generation transit vision called Transit 2050 Plus, which was ultimately incorporated into the long range plan with that focus on safety, frequency, and rider-focused improvements, and a emphasis on a 5-minute network of frequencies in our biggest cities, a 15-minute or better networks, ringing the Bay, and improved connections to the North Bay and other suburban communities. And then lastly, the last main focus of this limited and focused update was a continued elevation of resilience. And the plan incorporates the first ever sea level rise resilience project list, which is a list of levees, wetland restoration projects, seawalls, and other sorts of infrastructure investments necessary to protect our communities from rising sea levels. And this was first ever here in California, and recognizes that we have significant needs in that space, totaling nearly $100 billion over the next 25 years, and only a small sliver of that is available with existing resources. So it sets the stage for further advocacy at the federal level, as well as more opportunities for regional and local resources in that space. The plan also incorporated further refinements to fulfill the climate target established by the state. Why do we do these plans? Because we want to make sure that the region that we're leaving for future generations is better than the one we face today. And we, as part of our analysis, look at the effects of these strategies to try to understand what they would yield. And the plan has fairly bold ideas that would significantly improve affordability, especially for low-income households, increase the number of households that are able to live near frequent transit and have jobs near frequent transit, which would roughly double the share of folks walking, biking, or taking transit as their commute mode, and support economic and environmental goals as well. So that's a quick overview of what Plan Bay Area 2050 Plus is. But I wanted to talk today mostly about some of the priorities for implementation, which were codified in the plan's implementation chapter with a list of over 60 different actions to complete by the year 2030. Now, before we look, forward at the next 5 years of commitments, I think it is important to underscore that although progress may seem slow, we actually have made significant strides since these long-range plans that integrate transportation and land use commenced in the late 2000s. So looking at the statistics in the lower left, the share of Bay Area homes in what we call priority development areas identified by local governments as an opportunity to, cluster new growth near high quality transit continues to tick upward. Over time, of course, the number of units needs to continue to grow as well. But the share is pointing in the right direction, and we continue to see less and less greenfield development that creates, affordability and environmental impacts for Bay Area residents. And then the infrastructure space, again, we've seen just a proliferation of better bicycle amenities, protected bikeways and trails over the past 2 decades. We've replaced and upgraded bridges like the Bay Bridge, built out systems like SMART in the North Bay and extended BART to San Jose, built out new BRT lines like the Van Ness Corridor and the Tempo Corridor in the East Bay. And then, electrified Caltrain and replaced the BART fleet with new vehicles. So this has all happened in the past, 15 or so years, which I think, while there's still a lot more opportunity for improvement in our infrastructure and in our, housing across the region, we are moving in the right direction. So going forward, what are some of the priorities that have been identified in the implementation plan? Well, there are 65 of them, spanning the categories of planning, funding, coordination, advocacy, project delivery, and technical assistance. As you can see on the right-hand side, we do have a good number of actions in the transportation space, just given our legacy focus on transportation, but a growing focus on efforts related to housing and the environment. You'll also see in the lower left here that this implementation plan had really three key priorities. First, fulfilling existing commitments. So we don't want to drop any of the existing efforts that we are working hard on as we've been implementing Plan Bay Area 2050. Second, there have been a variety of pilot programs that have been pursued over the past 5 years. We'd like to transition successful pilots, which, many of them have been successful, but not all, transition those successful pilots into ongoing initiatives. And then third, it's going to be critical to secure resources to sustain progress. And this includes things like regional measures for transportation and housing, but also local efforts to secure resources through, say, like local housing bonds or other local measures, as well as, gaining resources from the state and federal governments. For example, in the environment space, our efforts related to sea level rise are really part of a multi-decade effort to quantify the needs in this space and to gain more state and federal support for those infrastructure investments, which has been making progress with the Army Corps now investing in the South Bay shoreline and further efforts underway to try to expand that type of work region-wide. So I'm not going to cover all 65 of the actions. These slides actually can't fit all of the actions on them, but they do spotlight a good number of the priorities. So I'll run through these in sequence. In the transportation space, obviously a big focus is all eyes are on the ballot in November 2026 to see if the measure authorized under SB 63 passes. So our focus is really preparing in case that measure does pass to make sure we're ready to advance things like ongoing transit transformation initiatives, which 5% of the funding from that effort would help advance. We're also keenly tracking the federal surface transportation reauthorization to make sure Bay Area priorities are advanced even under the tough federal climate we face. Um, I'll skip ahead here to some of the things in the delivery column. The Clipper Bay Pass program, which has been quite successful with institutions that have decided to get on board with that program. Would like to expand that to more institutions because it has been proven to really significantly increase the number of transit trips people take once they have access to an all-agency regional pass. We're also working closely with bus operators in the region on transit priority initiatives. Again, this kind of focuses on the point I made earlier about needing to invest in things that are lower cost in a fiscally constrained context and making sure buses can move more quickly so they're more competitive with automobile travel and they're not stuck in the same traffic as cars is really, really key. And although it's not as glamorous as a new rail corridor, it can yield much greater bang per buck. We're also continuing to focus on how to expand affordability and equity programs to make sure that we can, get more lower income residents in the Bay Area signed up for those and benefiting from them. And then on the rightmost column here, we're continuing to work with partners on things like how do we approach congestion management? What is the role of express lanes in a world where VMT reduction is a top state priority? And how do we continue to update our major project advancement policy, again, in the more fiscally constrained world of infrastructure? In the housing and economy aspects of Plan Bay Area, some of the things we're working on here, there's definitely interest in a 2028 housing measure. We're continuing to explore that with partners over the next couple of years. Would fulfill some critical financial needs in that space and bring monies to cities and counties looking to invest in more affordable housing. And the second column there, some of the notable things, the Doorway Housing Portal. That's been one of the success stories of the Bay Area Housing Financing Authority in its first few years of existence. It really helps to bring together multiple jurisdictions all across the region so folks can find affordable housing opportunities and apply for them all in one spot instead of having to fill out individual and unique applications for all sorts of different developments. I'd like to continue to double down in that space, and that's an initiative that is funded in part by the One Bay Area grant program. We're also keenly focused on supporting local jurisdictions with technical assistance, especially in advance of the next housing element cycle. For those of you who may have been part of the Cycle 6 regional housing need allocation process or your local jurisdiction's Cycle 6 housing element, you probably know that it was a challenging process for all, that the numbers that the region and jurisdictions faced were significantly higher due to changes in state law. We do anticipate those numbers will go even higher in Cycle 7, thanks to further changes in state law. The Housing and Community Development Department at the state level is responsible for calculating what that big number that the region will face is. We will receive that in the next year or two. And we would like to get ahead of making sure that our jurisdictions have information, resources, have spaces for collaboration, so they are ready for that Cycle 7 process, building on all the lessons learned. That's a very high priority for us in the early years of this implementation plan. We've also have been pivoting towards implementation of the transit-oriented communities policy. Obviously, there's a lot of policy discussion and debate about that over the past several years in terms of implementing the initial policy adopted by the Commission back in 2022. With those actions now behind us, we're looking ahead to the 2027 funding award opportunity for jurisdictions that hit that threshold of 85 points or higher. They will be eligible for those funding incentives. And we will, while it might be a little quieter on the TOC front over the next 12 months, we will be hopefully sharing back some good news with the Commission and with jurisdictions that hit that threshold in fall 2027. Last but not least, on the economy front, some areas of focus are really, leaning into goods movement planning. While not a priority for this year, we hope to begin an update to our regional goods movement plan in 2027 or 2028, and also looking forward to working with economic partners to determine how to best lift up economic vitality alongside issues like social equity in Plan Bay Area 2060. On the environment side, we're continuing to expand technical assistance resources for sea level rise adaptation. This is an area that a lot of jurisdictions have been leaning into. There are new state and regional mandates from BCDC to conduct these types of plans. We're also hoping to provide more resources to jurisdictions on wildfire and seismic challenges, and we're working to optimize transportation demand management initiatives, of which there are a variety of them on the regional and local scales. Also in the environment space, we're exploring ways to pilot acceleration of conservation and transportation project delivery through mitigation programs, building on efforts such as those in San Diego that's had a successful effort in that space. And also continuing to lean in on transportation electrification. We know there are a lot of barriers and challenges in that space. And while we're not in the lead, we do contribute funding to help advance things like charging stations that you see here in the photo. And we know that continuing to electrify our fleet is going to be critical for GHG reduction. Cutting across all aspects of the plan, there are a variety of priorities here. One is continued advocacy for what we call regional early action planning, or REAP funding. This has been very successful across the region in helping to fund lower cost initiatives that just don't fit in the traditional silos or boxes. It's helped fund a lot of that housing technical assistance I referred to earlier, pre-development activities at what we call priority sites, helping jurisdictions and developers move those forward. It's been a critical source for regional network management and transit transformation efforts. The bang per buck here really has been meaningful, even though it's a funding source that's in the millions, not billions. It has filled so many different gaps and helped us implement Plan Bay Area. It expires at the end of the year, and currently we are working with partners across the state to see what opportunities there are to continue that program and perhaps make it permanent. We're also working with the same partners on reforms to the planning process under Senate Bill 375. That's known as SB 1087. It just cleared the state Senate, I believe, last week, and is headed to the Assembly next week, or I should say, in the next few weeks. In just hitting a few more points here on the slide, you've heard me mention technical assistance as a priority. We're continuing to double down in that space where we can really add value for our local partners, growing our engagement with the disability community to make sure we're meeting those needs in our planning and in our implementation. And then continuing to refine our planning work for looking at these post-COVID shifts, updating our regional growth framework, and providing various technical resources to partners. I'm going to breeze through this slide because I do want to make sure we have time for questions and discussion. But in short, The implementation plan really serves as a 5-year roadmap to the suite of different programs and actions that MTC and ABAG look to advance in partnership. Um, we also provide a variety of different resources from planning tools to funding to jurisdictions to transportation partners to help move things forward. Plan Bay Area can't be advanced alone. It requires deep partnerships with all levels of government, with the private sector, and with nonprofits as well. As the right side of the slide shows, again, just to underscore, the plan doesn't allocate monies, override local land use authority, impose any mandates, or propose legislation, but it does provide that sort of foundational vision for the region of where we want to go. I'm going to kind of conclude with two brief topics here. First is tracking implementation. So, you probably are wondering, we had an implementation plan as part of Plan Bay Area 2050. There is one in this latest cycle. How do we know whether we're making progress? So there are two ways that we do this. One is we produce annual progress tracking reports. This was a commitment made in 2021. We've since published 3 of these reports in 2022, 3, and 4. As of that most recent report, over 3/4 of Plan Bay Area 2050 implementation actions were complete or well underway. And the next report, which will kind of synthesize both the completion of the 2050 cycle as well as the 65 new actions identified in 2050 plus, will provide a final tally, which we anticipate to be even higher than that 3/4 number. And we'll take a look at some of the early actions as part of this cycle. We also track progress by looking at regional metrics and trends. And the Vital Signs tool is kind of an ongoing decade-plus long initiative that has been looking at historical trends at the regional and local scales. It launched, as mentioned, in 2015 and went through a comprehensive redesign in 2023. And it allows you to not only see those regional trends, but really understand what's happening locally as well, tracking 41 different indicators with 100+ interactive charts and maps. Further upgrades are anticipated this year, including a new module kind of spotlighting progress made on Plan Bay Area 2050 plus metrics. The second topic to wrap things up is just a little bit of a look ahead at what's to come in the next few years. So while implementation is priority number one, we do have planning responsibilities that will be moving forward as well. The first is Plan Bay Area 2060, which I mentioned at the start will be a major update to this long-range regional vision. It does kick off this fall and will stretch nearly 4 years. Our goal with it is really to take a look at some of the hard fiscal constraints facing the region, perhaps increased fiscal constraint, both in transportation and in housing, and further look at, so the sort of new financial resources necessary to advance such an aspirational and visionary, plan. Plan Bay Area 2060 will seek to find balance across, planning trends and best practices, the long list of pressing issues facing the Bay Area, new and emerging regulatory requirements, and our shared vision. There's also the Regional Housing Need Allocation Cycle 7, right? Under the current schedule, HCD will provide that number that the region has to plan for by early 2028. ABAG is responsible for developing a methodology to allocate out that number to the 109 jurisdictions in the region by mid-2029, with adoption in 2030 as a statutorily required milestone. Housing elements are due in 2031. With both of those efforts, there'll be lots of opportunities to get engaged. And I want to just conclude by encouraging all of you to engage and participate in one or both of these upcoming efforts, from public workshops to stakeholder forums, uh, you know, as well as the Housing Methodology Committee that is stood up for the RHNA process. All of these pressing policy issues will be in the foreground through those efforts. And we really benefit from having a diversity of voices and perspectives informing our planning work. And so just want to make that plug for these efforts and encourage you to keep an eye on both of them as we move forward later this year. So with that, I can stop talking here and open it up for questions and comments.
Yeah, Dave, thank you so much. And just because there is an amazing turnout, if everybody can raise your hand and then I'll call on you one at a time to ask a question as I see them pop up on my screen. I also want to remind everybody today is primary day. So those ballots that may have been sitting on your desk or your night table for the last 30 days, go drop them off. And Google will tell you where to drop them off in your respective county, but please drop them off today. All right. So who's up with the first question here? Wow, I don't have anybody immediately raising their hands. This group is generally not shy. Shadi, I'm going to call on you to start us. I know you have something in your mind, Mr. Chair.
Uh-oh. Well, Dave and Sue, thank you so much for the presentation and for being with us. I'll turn my camera on too. Let's see if I can get that to work. Here we go. Good to see you too, and thanks for keeping us in the loop of where we are with the plan. I guess, can you, Dave, talk to the intersection of other policies in Plan Bay area, like the TOC and transportation and tolling and congestion pricing, and how is that all factored into this next round? And do you see any pressure points or conflict points between the various policies that the region needs to address? How was that? How about that for the question, Jared?
That was a good one. That was good. Thank you. That's why you became chair.
So thanks for the question. Good to see you. I would say we were just in the early stages of scoping Plan Bay Area 2060. I don't think it's even though this will be a major update, we're unlikely to throw out all of the strategies and start anew. I think we're more likely to optimize some of our strategies and incorporate some new ones. So because our goals, remain the same, a more affordable region, a region that hits its climate goals, all these sorts of things. There are, of course, tensions that exist between different policy goals. Affordability obviously is key. We have to figure out how to do that in a way that, also achieve some of the goals that sometimes are in tension with affordability. And so, when it comes to thinking about how much new revenues are we assuming, how are we going to advance our affordable housing goals, perhaps with a more fiscally constrained approach? That's going to be a key question. We'll also have to look at strategies that are essential for our climate goals, as you say, like pricing, but create concerns for affordability. Those are sorts of things we'll have to grapple with. The state has indicated, it's not dialing back the kind of ambitious climate goals facing the region. It may hold off on increasing those targets further, but those targets are quite difficult for us to achieve today and require all of the 35 strategies that are included in the plan. So we'll definitely have our hands full as part of Plan Bay Area 2060, demonstrating how we will hit a 2035 GHG target, which is just 9 years away now. So that leaves us fairly little time for the sort of strategies and to make progress towards that goal.
So thanks. I'll ask a question because last month we had BART in their real estate division talking about transportation-oriented housing that they're involved in, which is a point you made, Dave. one of the things we noticed in that is that there are several BART locations, parking lots that are several years, 5+ years out before they even start getting to. There's some that we understand, like Orinda isn't actually their property, it's Caltrans, but there are others that are still in that long term. Is there any way that we can all help speed that up from your perspective and other developments, not just BART, but other transit oriented development?
Well, I'll leave it to you all to think about maybe the ways, ways your different organizations can engage, but I'll give you an example of how we're trying to speed developments like that up. I briefly mentioned our priority sites pilot program, which is still a pilot, but I think we've seen some really impressive results from that across the region. So many of these developments, they have real hurdles. These infill developments have real hurdles to moving forward and penciling out. And so, that program has helped fund a lot of the nuts and bolts type activities that are necessary to get something to the point where it can move forward and break ground. And there are similar programs that are also REAP funded that have been advanced by peer agencies across the state, like SACOG's Green Means Go program, which is doing something similar to priority sites. So as I mentioned, those REAP dollars do run out at the end of this year. And I guess our hope is that we're able to extend that state funding program and find a way to continue to support that stream of investments that isn't possible with traditional transportation funding sources, which are the bulk of the revenues that MTC has a role in today. And that's the sort of stuff that's necessary to advance these land use projects, which get to transportation goals, which get to our environmental goals, all in one.
Well, and David, let me
Great.
just add that part of it also is the Housing Finance Authority discussion about a possible bond measure in 2028 or 2030. 2028 is, I think, what we're shooting for. And obviously that would provide significant funding for a lot of these, which is a big piece of what holds this stuff up is the ability to get financing for some of this. So that is also something that we're pursuing. And hopefully that can help the process as well.
That's great. Thanks, Sue. Ryan Lau from AC Transit. I see your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Jared. Thanks, Chair Nowak. Thanks, Dave. I'm sort of wondering, I'm assuming that there's some assumptions made when you're doing this planning work. And given that, transit and affordable housing is like a big, they sort of loom large in this plan. How do the changes that CARB just made in the Cap and Invest program affect those assumptions and progress toward those goals?
Yeah, obviously the CARB's action last week is concerning because it could have a quite significant impact on key programs like AHSC. That's a critical funding source for the housing element of Plan Bay Area, as well as things like TRCEP on the transportation side. This is why we update our long range plans every 4 years. I think we will go through that process in 2020, start that process in 2027, where we refresh those numbers. It's quite possible with state funding cuts or other challenges that we face even greater fiscal challenges in Plan Bay Area 2060. And so it's going to be important to prepare ourselves for, how are we continuing to optimize our transportation investments for a world where there is perhaps less funding and where project costs are growing at a rate faster than inflation.
I think one of the things, Dave, and you can concur, one of the things that we've discussed sort of briefly is adding a little bit more scenario planning into 2060. Where before it's sort of been one path, but I think we want to include in sort of a variety of scenarios in 2060 because the landscape is changing so quickly. So that will be an important piece of Plan Bay Area 2060 as well.
And Shadi, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I wanted to ask another question. Dave, you mentioned affordability, and as an organization that represents a lot of the businesses in the East Bay, we're very concerned about the affordability issue and ability to continue to support the economy in the East Bay and the Bay Area in general. And some of the policies in the Planned Bay Area are key part of the success of the failure of the region in terms of, continue to become economic engine, economic vitality, quality of life, all those aspects. My question is, are there any economic analysis done as part of the Planned Bay Area or on the side of the Planned Bay Area development that look at these policies and determines the positive or negative impacts of these policies on terms of job growth, job retention, people ability to, go to jobs and commute to jobs and all that stuff, and also ability to build more housing, which is what you're trying to do, but impact on the housing development in general, not just affordable housing, but housing demand.
So the short answer is yes, but there's room for further improvement and growth. So, we do analyze things like access to jobs by different income levels. We look at the typologies of jobs going forward. We look, yes, at affordable housing production, but also production market rate units as well, as those are a critical part of our strategy to spur housing production at all income levels. I think as I mentioned in the slides, as we go into Plan Bay Area 2060, we do want to take a fresh look at how we think about the economy in these plans. Historically, we've looked at it as here's a suite of additional strategies to advance economic goals. But we think there's maybe a better way to think about how transportation, housing, and environment strategies can spur and support economic vitality, kind of how we think about equity as a cross-cutting consideration for all 35 strategies. Perhaps we could think about economic vitality in the same way rather than placing it in this silo by itself. So we see that some opportunities to do more analysis and to do more thinking about kind of that economic lens in the next plan cycle. Even though we have some metrics and strategies already in that space, there may be a path forward that allows us to double down on economic goals while remembering that our agency's policy focus is transportation, housing, and environmental issues.
And I will just add that Andy Ramir and I have been working with Bay Area Council folks to figure out a way to do some convening of economic development groups in the entire Bay Area. Because while we are transportation and housing focused in a regional basis, we don't really have that much of a economic development regional group. And so we have been working to try to figure out how we can move that forward and potentially bring some economic development work on a regional basis, not necessarily within the plan, but separate from that.
That's great, Chair Nowak, to hear that. And if we can be part of the conversation or help with that conversation, that would be
I've talked to
helpful.
Mark a little bit about it already,
Yeah.
and we certainly will. It's just in the beginning stages on how we're going to do a convening of maybe all the different economic development groups. But it's really in the early stages, and we're working on that right now. We'll certainly keep you informed.
Thank you. And Dave, if there is, what I'm hoping for out of this exercise in the next round is there'll be some more kind of a measurable metrics that we can report on with these policies, because I think also speaking for some of the public don't understand the arena allocation and why can't we build and what, they don't understand that stuff. And I think there's a little bit more of a education that can be helped by more data that would explain exactly the impact, the positive impact, hopefully, on the economy of these policies. So.
Yeah. And so you mentioned earlier some conflicts, and there can be a little bit of conflict between some of HCD's policies and some of Plan Bay Area's policies. We've seen that in some of our organizations, and we would love to see sort of a better alignment of those goals in going forward. So certainly understand that, and we have communicated a lot of that to our legislators as well to see if we can get those better aligned going forward.
Excellent. Thank you.
Right. Dave, I'll ask a question about technology and the rapid world that AI is changing the way we could all be more productive in our daily lives. Particularly, I work with a lot of GovTech companies that are making government policies, programs, research, staff more efficient. Are you guys looking at how are you looking to incorporate that into 2050, 2060, the work you're doing, as well as educating some of your local government partners about all of the new technology that's out there, if at all?
Yeah, thanks for the question. We're is already transforming our workflows, right? And the Plan Bay Area 2050 Plus was the first plan where we were able to really look at feedback and comments using AI tools, and it's been very powerful in terms of expediting workflows. What I would say is in terms of future policy and planning. That's definitely one of the things we want to grapple with more in Plan Bay Area 2060. We develop a regional growth forecast as part of the long range plan. And through that process, we envision kind of trying to understand how those productivity impacts affect job projections and growth projections for the region going forward. As Chair Noack was mentioning, scenario planning is part of the first year of the long range planning process for 2060. So that's the sort of thing that we can really explore during that kind of what if phase of the process. And it'll be interesting we're going to be convening a group of kind of economic experts to participate in a technical advisory committee to advise us on that. So that's definitely a priority. The only other thing I want to say on this with regards to technologies is AI is definitely the one of the big new trends that we're all grappling with and facing, but there's a lot of other emerging technologies that have either been incorporated in past cycles or that we'll consider through this one. We've already been incorporating autonomous vehicle adoption as part of 2 cycles of Plan Bay Area now. We'll take a look at those projections again in 2060 based on latest trends with operators like Waymo. But we want to make sure we're keeping an eye and reflecting those trends rather than simply responding to them after the fact. And I think we were pretty proactive on that front in the past few cycles of Plan Bay Area.
Great. And I see before we wrap up, I see DB, you raised your hand. Do you want to chime in?
Yeah, thanks. Chatty mentioned education, and James Paxton has asked me to write a feature about the plan, and because people outside of this webinar and don't understand very much about the plan, I just quickly wondering if there are 1 or 2 things that you think are most important for the public to understand about the value of this plan or the utility of this plan. What could you tell us about why it's considered important?
What I would say is that planning is a critical first step to all the implementation work that we do as a region, at the local level as well. And we believe that this is kind of continue to serve as a really solid foundation to build upon and implement. And so, I mean, a couple things that I think these plans really underscore. One is that if we keep leaning in on opening up opportunities for housing in the right places, we can create better communities for the next generation. 2, we got real fiscal constraints going forward, and infrastructure projects are incredibly expensive. And so we need to get smarter. And I think this plan in particular kind of underscores that those strategies are the region's future, right? The things that cost millions, not billions, are going to be especially key, whether that's, just making the systems work better, right? And, and optimizing them and, using scarce dollars thoughtfully. And then I guess the last thing I would underscore is, There are continually changing policy challenges facing the region, right? We talked a little bit about new things that emerge like AI, but we're also facing some very long-term challenges that these plans help lift up, right? Like that sea level rise challenge. It's a slow-moving challenge, but it is very massive, right? And so simply having that map and list of all the projects needed in that space, that didn't exist 5 years ago. That existed because we worked closely with partners across the region to show what it would take to protect our communities. And so hopefully, while that doesn't solve the problem on its own, it's that first step that then we can build upon and say, okay, we have that vision. How do we go get the federal money to support it? How do we work with the state to support it? Those are a few of the lenses I would kind of underscore when it comes to the value of long range planning.
And I would also
Thank you,
add
Dave.
I would also just add the integration and the complementary nature. You don't want to plan for transportation without considering housing or considering resilience. And this plan allows you to think about all those things in an integrated fashion. And I think that's really important as well.
Thank you.
And James, you got a quick question?
Yeah, and just sort of follow up on Deborah's question there too. I think, and I absolutely recognize the vital importance of all the work that MTC and ABAG is doing. But a question for both Chair Nowak and Dave. There obviously is an issue with the implementation when you're relying on the goodwill of your 109 communities to kind of cooperate and sort of move everybody in the same direction. I was just sitting here shocked going, we've got 9 years to meet our CARB goals. And it's just like, wow. It seemed a lot farther off the last planning period when we had some more time. So the question really is there some discussion going on at MTC and ABAG about sort of how do we do a better job of corralling communities into cooperating towards this common vision? And I think everybody's sort of acknowledged they don't want, MTC and ABAG to be sort of the big brother, but there also is a need to really, it's sort of, how do you combine carrots and sticks? And, most of Planberry and everything else is all carrots. And relying on, fundraising through, bond measures and so forth. What are some of the other things that are being discussed to kind of really help build that sort of focus everybody in the same direction type of thing?
I'll just start out with, one of the things that we did this year was this TOC policy, which was very contentious across all parties. And we spent a lot of time on it trying to build an appropriate carrot, but also trying to corral everybody into the same understanding and direction. And I think it was a really good lesson for all of us. I think we had to listen to a wide, diverse set of opinions from a wide, diverse set of, areas. If you think about Sonoma County all the way down to Santa Clara, you have significant differences. But there are some underlying themes along the way, and it's not easy, but I think some policies and working through the discussion process helps everybody with the understanding. It doesn't always come out the exact way you want to, but even that discussion process, I think, is super important to underscore that. The same thing happened with SB 63, was the same thing. Also very diverse opinions, but it was good to hear them all. For everybody to hear them all and then come down to a conclusion, which everybody may not have been happy with, but everybody at least understood the direction. And I think those processes are helpful.
Do you see some upcoming policy discussions that'll help do the same thing in terms of kind of creating that regional consensus?
Well, I think some of it will be in our discussions on looking at a potential housing finance authority bond measure. We will likely have similar discussions there. And obviously, a lot hangs in the balance on SB 63 passing in November. If it doesn't, we will be having a lot of discussions in a lot of areas with a lot of diverse opinions. So hopefully we're not going to have to do that. But if we do, that's going to be another one. But I think the Housing Finance Authority bond will be important, those discussions.
Yeah. Dave, anything to add to that?
No, I think Chair Noack covered it all there.
So I want to be cognizant of the time. Dave Vaughton from MTC ABAG head planner, thank you for joining us. And Chair Noack, thank you for always being a longtime friend of EBLC and the East Bay overall. You've been a big supporter, and I think people out here should. They don't know how lucky they are to have a champion, so it's not all just San Francisco all the time. So appreciate that. Meg, anything else before everybody hangs up?
That's it. Thanks everyone for being here.